Breaking news. Putin gives the impression that the conflict in Ukraine will last for a long time and that he is not willing to put his money on Trump. On Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Kyiv could use any ceasefire to rearm and that Washington would continue to see Russia as an enemy regardless of who won the 2024 U.S. election, suggesting that he was preparing for a protracted war in Ukraine. Putin spent several hours at an economic forum in the Russian port city of Vladivostok, where he declared that the Ukrainian counteroffensive against Russian forces had failed and that the Ukrainian army had lost 71,000 men. In response to a moderator question from a Russian TV host, he said that Ukraine wouldn't talk peace until its armed forces were depleted of men, equipment, and ammunition. However, he assured that Ukraine would use a truce to replenish their resources and restore the combat capability of their armed forces. Many potential mediators, Putin said, had asked him if Russia was ready to stop fighting, but Putin said that Russia could hardly stop fighting while facing a Ukrainian counteroffensive. Putin has stated that talks cannot begin until Ukraine lifts its legal ban on peace talks and explains its goals. Putin responded, "Then we shall see." After invading Ukraine on February 24 last year in what it called a special military operation, Russia now controls about 18% of Ukrainian territory. This includes Crimea, which it annexed in 2014, and a swath of the country's east and south. There have been hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides of the conflict, and the war has wreaked havoc on urban centers and rural areas alike. After months of fighting, Ukraine has retaken a few villages and is getting closer to the heavily fortified Russian lines that are littered with landmines, but has not yet made any significant breakthroughs. Ukraine has pledged to keep fighting until all Russian troops are removed from its territory. The West claims it wants to aid Ukraine in its defeat of Russia, a goal that Kremlin officials dismiss as wishful thinking. Voting in the U.S. Putin claimed that the prosecution of Trump in the United States was politically motivated and indicative of the rottenness of the American political system. However, the head of the Kremlin stated that he did not anticipate any shift in U.S. policy toward Russia regardless of who was elected president in 2020. Putin said, "No matter who is elected president, there will be no fundamental changes in the Russian direction in U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. government views Russia as a mortal threat." Putin argued that the war and the West's attempt to limit Russia's $2.1 trillion economy accelerated the country's pivot towards Asia. Putin said the West was trying to prevent China from having close relations with Russia before his meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, but that their efforts had failed because relations between Moscow and Beijing were at an all-time high. He called it a crime that the West had given Ukraine cluster bombs and depleted uranium munitions. While these supplies could keep the war going for a while, he said, they wouldn't affect the outcome. He was also critical of the West's decision to sell F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and of any potential sale of Army tactical missile systems, ATACMS, by the United States. Earlier this month, Reuters reported that the Biden administration was considering allowing the sale of cluster bomb-laden long-range missiles to Ukraine. Reuters reporting. Guy Falconbridge author. Andrew Osborne and Angus MacSwan editors.